All right, we get it rolling on the Krueg Show. Hope everybody's having a great Thursday as we get things rolling. 3 o'clock on the West Coast, 2 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the Central Time Zone, where we welcome in Vish Kumaran from the Central Time Zone in the greater Chicago area. Vish, good to see you. Long time no see, man. It seems like we haven't done this for, hours, 48 hours.
Yeah, 48 hours. Yeah, it has been a long time, though, Larry. So much Niners news in that time, right?
Stuff is breaking left and right.
I know. How can we keep up with all of it?
Seriously, we were going to go live yesterday, but we decided to put it off to today. All right, so I entitled this, Why is Brock Purdy Disrespected? And some people might just say, hey, you know what? Krueg, your premise is wrong, so any conclusion that you come to is wrong. And I that's fair if you feel the premise is wrong, but I don't. I think that there's legitimate disrespect for Brock Purdy. And the reason I bring this up is I was looking into some numbers on what he did last year. And I was talking to a buddy of mine who scouts for a team in the Midwest, and he said, he's like, man, you got to be fired up for Brock Purdy. And I'm like, yeah, well, it's funny. There's a lot of people who are just kind of in a wait and see mode. And he's like, really? He's like, I'm shocked. He's like, I thought that kid played as well as I've seen any rookie quarterback play, maybe as long as I've been evaluating. And he's like, go look at the numbers, man. The numbers don't lie. So I decided to do a little deep dive on some of these numbers. And they're not like overwhelming or anything, but they're impressive. I will say they're impressive. This is what I came up with, just a quick assessment. And I don't know, Vish, what you think. You're a smart guy. I don't know what like you use to assess. Like, is there a stat that kind of rules the day when it comes to evaluating, or do you look at the whole picture? Do you let your eyes tell you? Is it the record of the team? So I looked at a few prominent stats. Okay, QBR, which is an ESPN stat. QBR, Purdy's QBR, 65.6. That was 5th in the NFL. The only quarterbacks that had a higher QBR than Brock last year were Patrick Mahomes, Tua Tagovailoa, Jalen Hurts, and Josh Allen. All damn good. So the people who were like, he's just Jimmy. He's Jimmy part 2. Jimmy was 17th in QBR, and he was having his best season, I think, maybe ever. Brock was 5th. So that's QBR. I don't know how much QBR factors in, but that's one stat. The other one was QB rating, which I know a lot of people that kind of use QB rating as the stat. Brock's QB rating was 107.3. It was the highest in the NFL. Now, granted, it was a smaller sample size, and maybe that drives it a little higher. But he was higher than Mahomes, higher than Tua, higher than everybody, higher than every other quarterback. Now, Jimmy's was 103, which was good too, but Purdy's 107.3. The other one is yards per attempt, because that one seems like it's very revealing. Purdy was 8.1 yards per attempt. That was 2nd in the NFL. Jimmy G had a really high yards per attempt. He was 7.9. Trey Lance's yards per attempt was 6.3, which would have been 33rd in the NFL. Now, granted, it was a very, very small sample size. So then I decided, well, maybe I'll go look at yards per attempt for Lance and Darnold and Purdy in college, just to see where they were in college. Purdy in college at Iowa State had an 8.3 yards per attempt. So he's basically doing in the pros what he did in college. 8.3 in college, 8.1 in the pros. Lance's was awesome. He was 9.3 yards per attempt at North Dakota State. Mm-hmm. So maybe what we saw last year from Lance was truly an aberration in such a small sample size that maybe he's going to be really great at driving the ball down the field. Sam Darnold's was really good too. It was 8.5 at USC was his yards per attempt. So I don't know. I'm seeing a lot of people, and some of them are just fans, but there's a bunch of people out there who are just like, it would be one thing if you said, hey, Brock was great. Brock was awesome, but he's hurt. And so, and who knows what he's going to return as. If that's your premise, I get it. But I see people are kind of like, I don't care if he's healthy or hurt. Even if he's healthy, he's not good enough to be the guy. And that constant drumbeat is out there that he's not good enough, that they need somebody better, that he's too low end, that he doesn't have enough upside, that he doesn't have enough, people will say arm strength or size or whatever it is. There's not enough there for them to be like, yeah, Brock's the guy. What do you think? I mean, are we, did we take Brock's rookie year for granted, and just be like, you know what? We just kind of immediately went from who is this guy to, yeah, he's doing great, but where do you think most Niner fans, media, the team itself, where do you think they are actually on Brock? And maybe I should just, instead of asking that, I should just ask you where you are on
Yeah,
Brock.
that's probably a better question because it's hard for me to estimate where other fans and
Sure.
other, if you want to consider me media, other media, or other people are on Brock Purdy. So where I'm at on Brock Purdy is for a rookie quarterback, and especially when, for me, the expectations are important, Larry. The fact that he is a seventh round pick, the fact that we've never seen a seventh round player produce like that as a rookie, as far as I can remember, let alone a quarterback. To me, yeah, of course, what he did last year was a big deal. Now, I'm also in wait and see mode, and that's because he's injured right now. I need to see the player return to being the same player he was before injury for me to then resume my expectations I had. As optimistic as I am about how well he played, which I did think was the best quarterback play that the Niners had received under Kyle Shanahan for the 8 games, as optimistic as I am about that, the timing and the seriousness of the injury have me having a little bit of question marks about Brock Purdy. Now, in terms of the actual expectations of the player, sure, I might have my long-term concerns of whether a player of his size can hold up for 17 games or 18 games or whatever the schedule is going to end up being. Because I do think they're trying to get to 18 games at some point. Maybe I do have questions about whether a player of his arm strength can hold up. But honestly, Larry, those questions to me are kind of moot because I know he can produce with this coach in this situation. I don't really care if his arm is big enough where if he has to play in Buffalo, can he play like Josh Allen where they drop him back 50 times out of the gun? Because that's not what he's asked to do. So within the confines of what he's asked to do, I think he's more than competent. I mean, the numbers were all top 5 in the NFL pretty much across the board. So the efficiency numbers were excellent. And you throw in the fact that he's a rookie. Yeah, there's obviously room to grow. There were plays. I thought progressively, Larry, I thought surprisingly, which I thought this was a weird thing, he played his best football in structure earlier than he did later. I thought later in the season there were more passed up throws, missed throws, running out of the pocket when you shouldn't have been. Whereas at the beginning of the season when he played, I mean, the Miami game when he came in, in the first quarter as the relief pitcher for Jimmy Garoppolo, that's about as clean a quarterback game as I think I've seen a Niners quarterback play, especially when you ask the number of times he had to get hot because of the numbers of zero pressures Miami sent. I thought that was phenomenal. And then the Tampa Bay game, Larry, he was outstanding. He played about as good as you can play. I did think it did get progressively worse, but you would expect that to happen for a rookie because there's growing pains with every player. And I'm not so much in the department of, hey, Brock Purdy can improve because he's only this big or this tall or this. I think if he plays, he could improve. He could become a great quarterback. I'm not setting that aside. What do I know? My point of concern and the reason I'm wait and see on Brock Purdy is because he tore a ligament in his throwing elbow, on the last, in February. And he then got surgery a month after that because the injury was severe and serious, where the timing of free agency, it became very close. The expectations of him returning without an offseason and all of that, I have questions about that. So that's where I need to see him return to being the same player before I can start projecting what he is or what he's going to be. But in terms of what he did last year for a 7th round rookie, it was nothing sort of sensational. probably one of the best performances a 7th-round rookie has ever had. One of the best, 8-game stretches for a rookie quarterback in the history of this sport.
We have so many people who play fantasy football that I almost feel like it's important to put this in a fantasy context as well. So during his 5 starts last season in the regular season, Purdy averaged 18.2 fantasy points per game. Just to put that in perspective, he was QB7. So he was the 7th best fantasy quarterback as far as scoring over his 5 starts. So was he the best quarterback in the league? No. But he was the 7th quarterback in the league, which is that right there is pretty impressive considering it was his first go round in the NFL. He did guide the Niners to 8 consecutive wins on the way to the NFC Championship game. And then, as you referenced there, he suffered the torn ulnar collateral ligament in his right elbow, had this procedure in the offseason, and now we're just waiting probably 2-3 more weeks, and then we're going to have a much better prognosis on where he is and what the fair expectation for this season is going to be. There was an interesting piece in ESPN where Dan Graziano reported that the sense around the 49ers is that Purdy would, quote, be the clear-cut starter if he weren't recovering from the elbow surgery.
Absolutely. That was told to us, right, directly by Shanahan and John Lynch.
Yeah, and based on how he played down the stretch, I think he's earned that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But at the same time, that injury clouds this picture. And, it's funny, the Niners sound like they're hopeful that he could return during training camp. Graziano, basically says the sense around the Niners is that he's the clear-cut starter if he's healthy. But then the question is also, what about Trey Lance? They invested a lot in Trey Lance. Can he live up to that potential? Can Sam Darnold, who's now here, resurrect his career? Is there still going to be a possible trade coming for Lance if he shows that he's got talent this year and they still want to go with Purdy? Is Purdy going to come back from this injury? Or is he going to somehow be diminished because of the injury and lose kind of his winning equation? There's a lot of questions surrounding this quarterback. Shanahan seemed to make it sound like, that he's basically doing everything that the other quarterbacks are doing. He just doesn't have a football in his hands. He's got a towel where they've got a football. And when he was asked about can Brock get better, he says, I think he's going to be a hell of a lot better. So that's interesting. What do you think, Vish? Because it's year 1 to year 2 is where we see the big jump in football. I think it has a lot to do with just the training methods and diet and all the different things that go into developing as a football player. But we see huge development year 1 to year 2. Is it possible that what we saw from Brock Purdy in year 1 is just the tip of the iceberg and that he could be a lot better? Because there's people in the chat here that are like, you know what? We've already seen his ceiling. We've already seen Brock Purdy's ceiling. And I would probably push back on that and say, I don't know that we've seen anybody's ceiling when they're a rookie in the NFL. How much better this is a kind of a weird question because I don't know how you're supposed to answer it, but do you think Brock can get a lot better, or do you think that he was a very polished product and what we saw last year was very close to his ceiling?
No, I do think he can get a lot better. And I think he's going to have to. In fact, what I was referencing, even if you go back and watch the end of last year, and I want to shout out Rich Madrid because he was the one who put me on it very early in the offseason. I know Rich has tweeted a few things about it, but he put me on it to go back and watch Purdy's games on film later in the season, but without the joy and the expectations and knowing how well he played in the moment and all of that what the 49ers were. And if you go look at that objectively, the same way you would watch any other quarterback, he leaves plays on the field. So obviously I think he can get better. In fact, I thought he got a little infatuated with his athletic ability and his ability to make plays getting out of the pocket where he created chaos at times when he didn't need to, right? The first half against Dallas, Larry, I think it's a great example, the dichotomy between the first and second half against Dallas, right? The second half against Dallas, everything back foot hits the ground, the ball is out now. He's throwing to a lot of open receivers, but he's running the offense rhythmically efficiently, the ball is coming out accurately, and the ball is coming out quickly, highlighting the brilliance of both Shanahan and also the greatness of the Niners' skill weapons. But in the first half, the ball is coming out late. He's drifting left a lot in the pocket. His speed, while it's great, he's unable to really attack the edges of Dallas's really fast perimeter of their defense. So you do have the dichotomy that shows that there are places for him to improve. And I think that's one area in specific. So I do think he can absolutely improve. This idea that he's so polished and he's maxed out his ceiling, I think that's total crap. Now, what is his ceiling? I don't know. I think realistically, there's only one archetype of quarterback he can be with his size and his arm, and that's a guy that plays on time and on schedule all the time and all the time. Now, he's playing in an offense that he can actually do that, Larry. This is one of the few offenses that you can play on time and on rhythm all the time and be right almost all the time because the coach is that good and all of that. So that's the kind of quarterback he's going to have to be. That's what he's going to have to improve to be to become a great player. Who am I to tell you that he can't become that? Who would have thought he would have played that well as a rookie? I don't understand Brock Purdy can only be this. Brock Purdy has reached his ceiling. This quarterback can only be this. That idea in the NFL doesn't exist. If I named you the 10 greatest quarterbacks of all time, they all have 10 completely unique skill sets. And they're all great because they're elite at different things. It's not because they're all 6'4", they're all 220 pounds, they all run 4.4. That's not what it is. And so I don't count against Brock Purdy becoming an excellent player. I think there's a road to get there. Now, the only difference I would say when people talk about ceiling with Brock Purdy and with Trey Lance is that there are more tangible opportunities in Trey Lance's game to be elite, right? So Trey Lance could be an archetype of a dual threat quarterback. He could be a runner and a passer. He's got the mental capacity to perhaps develop into a great pocket passer. He's got the ability to run any offense where they can throw the ball down the field and all of that. Brock Purdy's skill set, even at its best, is limited to a specific style of play that he has to play. I think that's the only difference. If Brock Purdy masters playing on time and on schedule, I think he can become an all-time great quarterback. If Trey Lance maximizes the usage of all his physical tools, I think he can become an all-time great quarterback too. See, I think they can both become great players. I just think that Trey Lance has greater opportunities because of his size and different tangible skill sets to become, I don't want to say a greater opportunity to become that player. He just has more different types of quarterbacks where he can be, whereas Brock Purdy has to just become a guy who's a master at playing in the pocket, moving in the pocket, throwing on time, and playing on schedule. But the stuff about his ceiling, I think, is somewhat bullshit because if he continues to do that in this offense, he could, become a great player in his own right as well.
Stovey 4x4ing says, this title, really? Brock isn't disrespected. So he's pushing back on the premise. I would just say to him is that I've read so many people saying that, yeah, he did this and that, but yeah, he did this and that, but yeah, he won 2 playoff games, but yeah, and I always point back to the injury, but a lot of times the people who are saying these things aren't even referencing the injury.
You know what I've noticed, Larry?
Go ahead.
Not to interrupt you. I've just noticed
please do.
That everybody who's really bought into a quarterback opinion feels that the guy they're bought into is disrespected and that the other guys are openly hating on him, right? I see an army of people talk about Trey Lance on a daily basis, how he's disrespected. You know what all those people have in common? They're sit there and crap on Sam Darnold every single day, right? Yeah. So they complain about how Trey Lance is being crapped on. They prop him up and they crap on Sam Darnold. Then you have the subsection of people who hate on Trey Lance every day. So they crap all over Trey Lance and they prop up Sam Darnold. And then you have, a subsection of people that crap on Brock Purdy to prop up Trey Lance, that crap on Brock Purdy to prop up Sam Darnold, and then prop up Brock Purdy to crap on Trey Lance and prop up Brock Purdy to crap on Sam Darnold. Really, all 3 of these quarterbacks are equally respected and disrespected because you have sanctions of this fan base that are so divided between the 3.
Well, let's hit that for a second, because to me, if you crap on Sam Darnold to prop up anybody else, while what you're saying I think is true, that there are things that you could point to crap on Sam Darnold. Massive amounts of turnovers. I'm seeing Ghosts quote, how poorly he's played in since he came out in the draft. If you wanted to crap on Trey Lance, it's a small sample size, but you could say, hey, third pick in the draft, 3 years in, hasn't really played, hasn't gotten anything done. Doesn't throw a catchable football, has a high drop percentage, hasn't done it, blah, blah, blah. I mean, there's things you can point to with some discontent. With Brock Purdy, he's never lost a game that he started and finished. If you're crapping on Brock Purdy to pump up one of the other guys, you're kind of crapping on nothing. That is kind of my point, is that he hasn't really given us things that we can point to and say that's a negative. He's won every game and played really well statistically to boot. So to me, it's just like, I get the whole premise of that, but I just push back on the Brock Purdy part of it because what are we ripping? He was a rookie quarterback who came off the bench and ran the table and won two playoff games.
So I think people that are skeptical about Brock Purdy aren't necessarily ripping on the performance. They're just skeptical of the sustainability of the performance.
That's fair.
And whether you agree with that or not, because I think you and I just detailed, I'm kind of in the middle of that. I'm not necessarily skeptical of the performance, but I'm not also sitting here banging the drum saying Brock Purdy is going to be great. I think you are closer to the Brock Purdy is going to be great because you've been on that wave for way before he even played these 8 games. Like, you felt there was a special player there, right? You predicted to me last offseason that there would be a competition between Brock Purdy and Trey Lance for the starter this season. So you've been on that wave. And then there's also then the section of people that aren't necessarily against what Brock Purdy has done because again, like you mentioned, you can nitpick and say, well, he's missed these throws, he's missed this, he's missed that. But the overall sample of his 8 games was terrific play, especially when you throw in he's a 7th-round rookie and all of that. It's just people look at the size. And look, Larry, I mean, those are legitimate question marks. There's a reason that most of the quarterbacks that get drafted, besides Bryce Young, are 6'3", because people like bigger quarterbacks.
You think that might be part of it? Just the dimensions of the player?
Of the dimensions and the pre-draft perception for sure.
Yeah.
People were bought into Trey Lance being a great player a year before Trey Lance was drafted. Who cared about Brock Purdy last year? So Brock Purdy has to.
It's funny how draft position.
Yeah.
It's funny how draft position is so tied to your identity as a player.
Before Dak Prescott got his second contract, do you remember how much Dak had to do to be put in the same conversation as Goff and Wentz, who were drafted in the same draft as him 3 rounds earlier? Now, Dak, from day one, arguably played better than them, both of them, from day one to now. He's had a steadier career. I do think Wentz might have hit a couple of highs that were higher than Dak earlier in his career, but overall, Dak has been steady, and Dak has been the best of the 3. But just because he was the 4th-round pick, and those 2 were pick 1 and pick 2, and people were like, those are already going to be great quarterbacks. I think that's real. I think that's very real. Like, it's Sam Darnold. It'll take Sam Darnold 1 or 2 good games for all that national media that thought Sam Darnold was the greatest prospect ever before his draft, which a lot of these guys in the national media did, for them to hop back and say, see, I told you, such a talented player, just needed the right situation. They did the same thing 3 weeks into his Carolina career before Christian McCaffrey got hurt when they started 3-0. And then that fell all apart in 2021. So, yeah.
Yeah, it is weird. We have 3 quarterbacks who are in 3 different categories. You're right. There's this Sam supporters who are just quiet right now because Sam's been bad. But you do get the feeling if Sam plays well, they're going to come out of the woodwork.
Oh, yeah.
Sam. And then, Clarsard says, hey, Purdy fans hate on Trey. Trey fans hate on Purdy. That's how it is. I don't think that Purdy fans are hating on Trey. They're just saying, hey, Purdy's done it. Trey hasn't. Let's pump the brakes on the guy who hasn't. And and on the other end of things, I think what you said is totally right. I think the Trey fans are saying they're not hating on Purdy, but they're just saying, hey, look, let's not overreact to a small sample size of Brock, and let's acknowledge the fact that there's size limitations and there's, maybe some upside limitations based on the size of the player and the overall skill set, that they're saying, let's not go away from Trey because Trey might be the guy who can beat Mahomes or beat Josh Allen.
Exactly. And I think the first part that you said needs to be repeated too. I think a lot of people aren't skeptical of Trey Lance because they hate on Trey Lance, right? That conversation immediately turns very aggressive and very combative. Instead, I think just like people are skeptical of the long-term future of Brock Purdy, there's people that look at Trey Lance and say the guy has thrown, 400 passes since his senior year of high school, which was 5 years ago.
It's amazing.
And yeah, so I mean, there's definite reasons to be skeptical of Trey Lance becoming a good player too. Nobody knows if he'll become a good one or a bad one. And I don't think that you're necessarily wrong if you say, I think he's not going to be good. I also don't think you're wrong if you say, I think he's going to be great. We just don't know. That's the beauty of him. And it's funny because I find the hypocrisy of all the sides that debate this to just be completely hilarious. That's why I don't really get involved in this debate whatsoever, because I think it's a completely useless exercise.
Well, and it also kind of highlights a good comment here, I think, from Taylor. He says, Krueger Vish, if you were to drop the perfect quarterback for Shanahan, what would be the top 3 traits, top 5 traits? Where would arm strength be in that equation? We do have a tendency to put a lot of credence into stature and arm strength.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, what did Brock Osweiler have? He had stature and arm strength. What did Dan McGuire have? He had stature and arm strength. What did Jacob Eason, who the Niners just cut and last year, and then I saw Carolina cut him today? What does Jacob Eason have? Stature, physical stature, and arm strength.
I agree.
Guys who have stature and arm strength get more opportunities.
I agree. But all those guys that you mentioned, they had one quality that went along with stature that's an issue in modern.
Slow.
You can't have slow feet. You just can't have slow feet. But you couldn't have slow feet even in 1985.
That's a good point.
I've read books about Bill Walsh talking about quarterbacks where he talks about how much he values foot quickness and foot explosiveness. And in terms of arm strength, I don't know if Shanahan necessarily values arm power in terms of distance, in terms of being able to throw the ball outside the numbers. But I do think he values arm explosion in terms of being able to generate torque quickly from the pocket, where you're able to go into play action, immediately flip your hips, flip your full body with a very explosive and aggressive action, and get the ball out with high revs out of your hands quickly. Like Jimmy Garoppolo is a great example of this, right? Like Jimmy doesn't have a powerful arm, but Jimmy is capable of getting the ball out of his hands quickly and with a lot of pace, if that makes sense. So I do think there's value to that. And then the other 2 I would probably name that Shanahan really looks for is movement in the pocket. So explosive ability to move within the pocket and naturally move away from people and create space in the pocket to throw, and being tough with that, and then accuracy, I'm sure.
2 last things on the quarterback front. One, a quote from Shanahan here. He says, as long as Brock's elbow heals right, and that's a big if, obviously, he'll be the exact same guy. This is what Shanahan said last week. And when you have a clean break like that or tear like that, it will be. You can have a setback and you can have something heal wrong, and everything's been completely on pace. And just watching him now, he's doing the same drills all the other quarterbacks are doing. He's just using a towel to throw, but still doing violent motion, still moving it. He's not just he's just not doing it with the football. He'll get closer to that, and as long as there's not a setback, we think he'll be there in training camp, which is interesting. One other point was Stats Guerrera and Guerrera or Guerra? Guerrera. Stats Guerrera.
Your new friend.
Yeah, that's right, my new buddy. Him and Grant did a thing today, and they were talking about, Louis Riddick's comments to Rich Eisen, who just seems like I love Rich Eisen. He's one of my favorite guys, but Grant pointed it out, and he's so up the Niners' ass. It's unbelievable. He just the Niners literally could burn down Levi's, and he'd be like, hey, you know what? We needed to heat things up a little bit. And, we needed some more fire in Northern California. He would literally make an excuse for anything they do. But they were speculating that maybe the quarterback whisperer who told Louis Riddick that Sam Darnold, just trust me on Sam Darnold, he looks great. Maybe it's Brian Greasy, because they worked together on Monday Night Football. That's obviously wild speculation. But at the same time, I can see why people connect the dots there. It is interesting. I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole, but I'll throw it to you. When you hear them, when I draw that connection between Greasy and Riddick and the comments that were very pro Darnold, do you think it's possible that it emanated from Brian Greasy?
Yeah, definitely possible.
Possible.
Sure.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I think a lot of more value is being placed into those comments than need be. The way I read those comments from Riddick is that somebody who he talks to and he thinks has a high opinion and a high ability to evaluate the position. So it could be Brian Greasy, it could be a quarterback coach, just someone who Louis Riddick, who in my opinion is a very smart evaluator of talent. He trusts this guy's opinion when it comes to quarterbacks, no matter what. Just thinks that Sam Darnold's ability could be unlocked by the 49ers, which means that they just have a lot of belief in Sam Darnold's belief in ability. And I think they just shared that with Louis Riddick. Now, if that's Brian Greasy, I think it's more ominous than what I think it was. And to me, it just sounded like someone that Riddick knew really well, that knows quarterbacks really, really well. Could be a quarterback coach. It could be one of those quarterback trainers like a Tom House, something like that. And they were just saying, hey, they were just sharing an opinion that they felt the Niners signing Sam Darnold would unlock Sam Darnold finally. And look, Sam Darnold, as much as I've never been that big of a fan of the player, he has talent, Larry. I think he does have like real, tangible physical talent.
Stature and arm
Yeah.
strength.
Stature, arm strength, but he's also got a quick delivery. He can get the ball out of his hands quickly with pace. He throws the ball short, accurate over the middle of the field very well. He's got very quick and mobile feet for a big guy, in the sense that he's really athletic. He's not really athletic in the sense that he's going to run for like an 80-yard touchdown, but he's really athletic where he can make a couple of guys miss in a short area space, which for a big guy to be that light on your feet is a unique skill. And then he has the ability to throw with his feet being in awkward positions, right? Which is a trait Shanahan has talked about a lot with his quarterback. So he has ability. There's a reason why he was the third pick in the draft. And that person, the way I read that comment was just that person seemed to think that ability was going to get unlocked by the 49ers. Perhaps it does. Maybe it does. I don't know.
Knees throws a super chat. He says 49er Twitter and YouTube are just a back and forth echo chamber. Purdy got a standing ovation at the Giants game from normal fans. They had to pause the game. Oh, you mean the San Francisco? I was thinking the Giants game. The San Francisco Giants game.
Oh, you thought he went to a New York Giants game and they were like, Purdy.
Well, no. First of all, I just the idea of going to a Giants game is so foreign to me right now, just because they've been so dull. But yes, you're right. You're right. The rank and file Niner fan and Bay Area sports fan are totally enamored with Brock Purdy. You're right, Knees. So me throwing out why is Purdy being disrespected is maybe my sense of it more than anything. But it's really more like with Sam Darnold, it's like he's been bad and people are telling us, no, he's good. With Trey Lance, he's been nothing and people are like, no, he's good. But with Brock Purdy, he's been good. And yet there are people that are kind of like, hey, he's not that good. And to me, that's the difference. Is that if you want to say that Sam Darnold's good, fine, but he hasn't been good. If you want to say that Trey Lance is going to be good, fine, but it hasn't happened yet. But when a guy's already done it, and then that includes playoff wins, and then there are people pushing back saying he's not very good, and he doesn't have very much upside, and he's not the future, then it's always kind of like I'm kind of wondering more like, what's that person's agenda? Because it doesn't get better than winning games, and they won games. And it wasn't like they didn't produce points. They scored 33 points a game. And it wasn't like it was just regular season games. It was playoff games too.
I will say, Larry, I think that you're looking for a general consensus here. And I don't think you're going to find one. Everybody has a different opinion on these quarterbacks. And I think for a general consensus to arise, the Niners have to get a consensus on their quarterbacks. And as long as Purdy's injured, we're not going to have a consensus because his return and the timing of his return always puts it up in the air. If you don't mind, Larry, I did want to touch on this comment from Raymond Martinez Jr.
Yeah,
when he
let's see.
talks about,
Where is he here? Well, hold on.
he
Is it up
says,
higher?
yeah, but we just talked about draft selection, arm strength. Okay. So
He says,
this,
yeah. Raymond Martinez says, yeah, but we just talked about draft selection, arm strength, and stature, and how it doesn't equate to good quarterback play. But there's somehow still hope that Darnold will stop being a bad decision maker. I'll even say this. I'll push back on one of Vish's comments where you talked about his release. I actually see a player with an elongated release. I know he's got good arm strength, and I think the accuracy is not bad. But to me, here to here
long.
back. It's a little bit of a hitch.
Go watch his release today compared to what it was when he came out at USC.
It's quite a bit better. You're saying
all the way out here. Used to dip it way below his waist. It used to be a full rotation. He had the full loopy motion. But he's got a pretty quick release, I would say. So the thing with this point, right, that Darnold's a bad decision maker, I think the people that are looking at his bad decision making, look, the last year at USC when the turnover problems started, and by the way, I would like to preface this by saying I'm not a Sam Darnold fan. I'm just trying to make sense of why really smart people seem to have this really high opinion of Sam Darnold. It is when you look at the last season of USC. So USC under Clay Helton was an absolute mess. There's no doubt about it. They were a mess. They had one really strong year, and that was the year Sam Darnold took them to the Rose Bowl, and they won the Rose Bowl against Penn State his sophomore year. His junior year, they lost Ronald Jones. They lost Juju Smith-Schuster. They were not a very good team around him. They were not a very good offense, and he compounded those mistakes because he tends to panic a little bit. We saw that panic increase in bad situations in the NFL, right? The idea is that he throws the ball up for grabs. He gives it up. He makes turnover-worthy plays when he can get rattled. And he can get rattled when the situation's really inexact and the pressure's really on him to make a play. And he really, really tries to make a play, and he often doesn't make a play and makes things worse. I agree. He's been turnover prone. The idea is that if you put him in an offense with Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel, and you show him open receivers, and you build his confidence, he's not going to panic to turn the football over because there's going to be wide open people. There's going to be people in front of him. He's going to be able to trust his protection. He's going to be able to trust his offense is going to get people open. That's what the people that think he's going to do well within this offense think. Whether that happens, I have no clue, to be honest with you. I have absolutely no clue. I'm excited to see it play out. But the reason people are so bought into this is because they feel like his issue with the panic and all of that is fixable in a better situation. And they really believe in the rest of the talent that he has. And, Sin, my good friend in the comments, is saying excuses are constantly being made for him. I feel that way all the time about him. I feel like for whatever reason, he's a USC quarterback, and the national media was really, really bought into him after his sophomore year. So every year we blame someone else other than Sam Darnold, for Sam Darnold playing poorly. But for whatever reason, really smart people seem to do that. So they're really bought into the talent of this player for whatever reason. And I think the science of why they think he can do well in San Francisco is what I just laid out. Now, whether I agree with it, no clue. But that's what people think.
Well, it goes back to the Brian Billick comment, which is the hardest thing to evaluate is the quarterback versus what's going on around the quarterback. There are people looking at that Jet situation and that Carolina situation, and they're really giving Sam Darnold, let's be honest, they're giving him a pass. They're giving him a pass, and they're saying, you know what, that's not going to happen here, and we're going to find out soon enough. I have tendency to believe you kind of are what you are.
I think so too.
But Billick is right. I mean, we've seen. I mean, Steve Young didn't look good in Tampa. Looked great with the Niners. Vinny Testaverde didn't look good with Tampa. Sure played well with the Jets and Ravens. So I mean, it's not like we've never seen a quarterback go from one spot to another and kind of find himself. But I think maybe people are going a little extra, giving Sam a little bit more of a pass than I would. But we'll see this summer. Joey says pulling for Trey, but whoever wins the job in the Super Bowl, I'm with. If we have three quarterbacks that are good, we can get some trade compensation. Yeah, I mean, that's one way to look at it for sure. All right, let's jump to a couple of the topics before we call this quits. Jason Aponte on Niners Nation has a pretty good article, and one that I think is interesting, and he's asking the question, is there any chance that Jair Brown can beat out Tayshaun Gibson for that starting free safety role opposite Talanoa Hufanga. Gibson was really good last year. He was fantastic. I mean, he signed a 1-year deal for $2.9 million, $2.1 million guaranteed. Gibson did, and he's been, he's a productive interceptor. He's a great center fielder. Ball hawk, who's going to take the ball away from you. He had 5 interceptions, 8 pass breakups, 61 tackles. The guy's got like 35 career interceptions. So he's kind of a proven ball hawk in center field. But I think get the feeling that Jair Brown's probably a little bit better all-around player, than Gibson. What do you think? Is Gibson going to be the starter at free safety, or is it possible that Jair Brown, on the strength of his overall game, takes that job away from him going into the season?
It all just depends about how they feel about it financially. I really think Jair Brown, when I look at him, Larry, I do believe he's capable of having the kind of offseason that vaults himself into a starting caliber role or a high role on this defense where he's playing a lot of snaps as a third safety. He adds versatility in the slot. He's a good blitzer. He can really play anywhere in the secondary besides really outside corner. So I do think that he's going to play quite a few snaps. Whether they covet, the $1.3 million of dead cap that includes the post-June 1st cut, because they're not going to be able to trade Tayshaun Gibson. That's very unlikely. So whether they would rather have the $730,000 of savings or whether they would just rather have Tayshaun Gibson, a very steady presence. They can put him back there. He'll do his job. He won't make mistakes. He'll be at the right spot at the right time, and he finds ways to take the football away on errant throws in the back end. It's really going to feel, to me, come down to their trust in the entire situation. But in terms of the capability of Jair Brown to beat out Tayshaun Gibson from just a pure upside standpoint, I think that's definitely possible. It's just that the Niners might still elect to want to have that steady veteran presence and have Jair Brown play a lot of snaps, but not put the starting pressure on him, especially if they have to start somewhat of a young secondary. With Hufanga, he had quite a few blunders over the course of the season last year. He also had a lot of big plays. There was why he was first team All-Pro, but he had quite a few blunders, and it would put a lot of pressure on Jair Brown to play center field a lot as a rookie if they play single high, because they don't seem to really like putting Hufanga there. So therefore, I think just keeping Gibson back there probably is steady, and it just comes down to the money to me, really. If they want that $730,000 so bad, they might go with that. But I think it won't be a problem for Brown. I think Brown will be right there by the end of the offseason.
I think Gibson's going to keep the job just because the single high safety and a cover 3 look is your last line of defense. And I just think they're going to play it more conservatively. I think they'll want their last line of defense to be a veteran who's been there, seen it, done it. Let's just say this. If Jair Brown takes Gibson's job, it will be because it was so glaringly obvious to every person in the stadium, from the guy in the last seat in the upper deck, that Brown was like spectacular and had to be the starter. It won't be because, you know what, Brown's a 7 and Gibson's a 6, and no. It will have to be like Brown's like, Brown looks
Brown's
like
the
a
best
Pro
player
Bowler
on the field. They can't keep him off of it, right?
Exactly.
I agree.
That's
Even if Brown's excellent, where they look at Brown and say he could start, I think they would just say have him play a lot of snaps as a rookie in a lot of different roles and just keep Gibson because he's really not that expensive and he's pretty good.
I agree. All right, how about this one? We got a chance last week during the rookie minicamp to talk to Steve Wilks. And Wilks comes in. He's coached all over the place, and he's coached different schemes. Heck, when he was in college, he's coaching like a 3-3-5 defense. He's had a bunch of different looks. How much different is the Niner defense going to look with Wilks? Will we be able to see a discernible difference between what Saleh did as the coordinator, what D'Amico did as the coordinator, and what Wilks is going to do? And if so, what will be the differences?
For sure, I think it's going to look structurally like the same exact defense on first and second down. I think third down is where maybe you see a distinction But even on third down, I think that they probably will pressure maybe a little bit more. Maybe they'll be more aggressive in terms of playing man-to-man coverage. But man, I could see Wilkes also just doing a similar thing where you have a lot of sim pressure, similar to what D'Amico and where Saleh was doing in 2020, and then you had what D'Amico was doing the last 2 years. And here's why. I feel like I was the only one saying this before they hired a coordinator and all of that. So not to pat myself on the back, but I told you that structurally they were going to try to keep the same defense and make the coordinator adjust to it. It's because they believe so much in the players, and look at how well the players play within this scheme. Look at how fast Fred Warner plays. Look at how fast Nick Bosa plays. It's because they don't change their role a lot in their defense. They don't have them think a lot. They have them do the same exact things, and those players are so exceptional, both with how they are cognitively, but also how tangible or how many tangible gifts they have physically that they do such a good job. So I can't see Wilkes coming in here and now all of a sudden we have multiple fronts and we have the Niners giving you the 3-3-5 looks, and we have the Niners defense now with all these exotic blitzes, and they're running zero pressures out of everywhere. They're looking like the New England Patriots. No, I don't see that happening. You might see a couple of variations of different blitzes on third downs. You might maybe see a little bit more aggressive man-to-man coverage, but I think it's going to mostly stay the same because if it ain't broke, why fix it? They have amazing personnel. And this scheme is built to just play to the personnel. Why would they come in here and complicate it now after they just paid, 4 years, $80 million for one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL who plays best when you just tell him, hey, get upfield and get the quarterback? Why would you be like, all right, now we're going to come in, we're going to play this 3-4 cover 6 Fangio look, and we're going to have Javon Hargrave come in 2-gap here. That doesn't make sense to me. So structurally, I think it's going to remain almost the same in a lot of ways, maybe a couple of different wrinkles. But honestly, Larry, I think by the end of the season, I think the average person who very casually watches the Niners every Sunday here and there, who doesn't know the basics, they won't say that, wow, the Niners defense looks so different now. But I do think there will be a couple of nuanced things there that are slightly different because coach to coach, they might play cover 3 a different way. They might rotate to quarters a different way. And those are different things that I think coach to coach, there are subtle nuances and details that are different.
I think that the front is going to be the same. I think that's why, Kocurek is there. He orchestrates the games up front. I think the fronts are going to be the same. You may see some dogs, you may see some linebacker blitzes, and I think you may see them mix it up on the back end where you've got a cloud on this side and you got man-to-man on this side, and they're going to, you know what I mean? I could see because Steve's expertise is on the back end, and Luter is like a great press man corner. And when I asked him about it, he's like, yeah, I played press man. Even when we were playing zone on the other side, I'm playing press man on my side. And
Larry, can I ask you this though? Because I've heard this being said a lot.
Yeah.
I've heard this being said a lot, and I mean this with all due respect to one Darrell Luther, who I'm yet to watch. So I have no clue how good of a player he is or isn't.
Yeah.
But how many 5th-round corners do you know that walk into the NFL and teams go, hey, that's the guy that we're going to have play press man one-on-one. You're the guy. That corner, if you're a corner that walks into the NFL and teams are like, you're a press man guy, we're going to have you play press man 90% of the time. Usually you're picked in the top 30, 40 picks in the draft because you're a one-of-one guy physically, right? You're a Revis. You're a
Dion.
Right,
Totally.
Yeah.
But I will say this. I mean, I've seen coaches on the field go through all the different coaching points in playing off coverage, playing press man up on the line, playing zone coverage in different kinds of zones. And there's so many different coaching points that sometimes you have coaches that want to play to what they view as the strengths of their players. And if Luter has played so much press man and he likes to get up on the line of scrimmage and get his hands on a guy, it's a totally different world than playing man-to-man, but you're playing off. Because off, you have to absorb that player, and your timing has to be right, and your footwork has to be right. So I don't know. I mean, this is the one thing. Like if Steve were sitting here with us, Vish, I would say to him, let's talk a little bit about your philosophy on coverage. And do you like to have every guy doing everything, or are you cognizant of this guy likes this guy's better at that? Because man, I've seen guys, especially if they're up on the line of scrimmage and they like to get their hands on you and physically play bump and run. It's a totally different deal than playing off coverage and absorbing that cushion seamlessly and then settling into your man-to-man. So I don't know. I mean, I'd love to hear his philosophy on, yeah, you know what?
100%.
I've had guys who just can't play off coverage.
Do you think they're going to play press more in general? Because, I mean, Mooney Ward, when they signed him, I think a lot of us felt that it was trending that way because that's what he did best in Kansas City. Now, he had a couple of games where he got absolutely burned for doing it, but that's what happens when you have to play press man that many snaps against Jamar Chase. Sometimes he puts 9 for, what did he give him? 10 for 217 and 3 touchdowns. He put that on his head. Gave him something kind of nasty like that. So maybe it's there. And do you think maybe now there's a resurgence of Ambry Thomas, whose entire game was playing press man at Michigan?
And Womack. Don't forget Womack.
True.
You know, so I you know what? That's the one mystery. And you know what? We're not going to really know. We're not going to know in camp. We're not going to know in the preseason. We're not really going to know until we get a month into the season and we can see 3, 4, 5 games and see them match up against different types of offenses, different types of receivers, and see what Steve likes. But I will say this, you know, the old saying in football is if you match up, you play man. If you don't match up physically, you play zone. The Niners have played predominantly zone, but they've also invested a lot of their money up front on their defensive line.
Right.
And maybe they've played zone because they don't feel like they match up. Now you add a Jair Brown. Now you add a Darrell Luter Jr. Now you add Womack, and you've got some guys who maybe are more comfortable in man. I just think that if you have guys who can play man, you have flexibility to do what you want.
I agree, but here's why I think actually playing zone is better for the Niners. Their best quality in pass coverage,
taking the ball away.
Their best player in pass coverage is their middle linebacker. He takes the middle of the field away, and he does it because he's able to gather depth, but he's so fast and so quick at triggering that he's also able to take away routes in front of him. It's almost like he has eyes in the back of his head, but then he also has the speed to carry routes that, you know, come across his face, that he has to carry vertically. Fred Warner is the most special coverage, one of the most special coverage linebackers I think we've ever seen in the history of football. And I think that's where, when you play that much zone, they're able to just eliminate the middle of the field and allow their secondary to play very confidently and play off coverage and trigger quickly because their linebacker takes away so much. I do have one question for you, though, on the secondary.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned this. Do you think that they, based on what you've seen so far this offseason in terms of your interactions at the facility with Shanahan and all of that, you think they view Sam Womack as an outside corner? Or
I do.
Okay.
But I also know that Sam can play the slot. He can play inside.
Right.
But I think Samuel Womack is going to be one of the revelations of camp, because if you look at his film from last year, there were a number of times where he broke really well on the football and got his hands on it and dropped it or just tipped it. This year, I think he'll play a step or two faster, and I expect his interception production to go way, way up, and I expect him to get a couple pick sixes this year.
Yeah, and he has, I mean, the only thing he doesn't have in terms of playing outside is just the height, right? He has the length of an outside corner, and he has the speed of an outside corner, so it makes sense why they would want him to play outside too. He's certainly got the attributes.
Last topic. And this one might be a little bit of a stretch. If you think it is, you know, push back and tell me it's a stretch. When I threw it to my kid earlier today, he's like, "Dad, that's a major stretch." So here we go. You know, some guys seem like they have their roster spot. You know, they're like challenged for their spot on the roster every year. Other guys, it's like they're never, you know, they're like the only guy and they're never challenged for their roster spot. One guy that I think is in that category is Kyle Juszczyk. He's always kind of there. He's omnipresent. They usually don't even bring in anybody who could even run his in his place if he got hurt. So he's almost like he reminds me of like a congressman who's been in, like his 19th term or something.
It's not just that. He also gets a free trip to Hawaii or wherever the Pro Bowl is every year, and then they just give him an honorary All-Pro spot. Like, here you go, buddy.
And he's a great guy, and he is a big-time performer. But this year, and excuse me for noticing, but they have two guys now in that are going to probably go to training camp that could play his spot. You got Braden Willis, and the more I thought of Braden Willis on draft day, the more I thought, oh man, Niners went 2 tight ends, and man, Dwelly could be out of a gig. But then after watching Braden Willis in minicamp, he looks to me like a receiving fullback who you would just want to spot here and there at tight end. His body type is much more that of a fullback. So there's him. And then you got Jack Coletto, and they're going to be hard pressed on the roster for roster spots. And Coletto, can play that emergency quarterback. He can play special teams. He can do a lot of things, and he's 240. And there were a bunch of teams that wanted Coletto, and somehow the 49ers kept him from Denver and a couple other spots. And he's the more I watch him, the more I think, okay, he played linebacker. He's not a linebacker. He played quarterback. He's not a quarterback, but he played fullback. And of all of his positions, he does look like a fullback. So I'm just kind of wondering, is it a foregone conclusion in your mind that Juice makes this roster, or is this the summer that he's under fire for his spot from those two guys?
Oh, I think he 100% makes it this offseason, but I think you've read the right tea leaves because they have a potential out on his contract after next year. And I think if they're wise, they take that out because he's going to get more expensive. I think he's 32 right now, so those will be his 34th. There we go. Taylor Broussard nailed it. So, yeah, the 34th and the 35th season, you don't want to pay him that much money. In fact, here's kind of a wild take because he is a very valuable player. I didn't think they should have re-signed him in the first place when they did in 2020. And it's because he plays, maximum of 40% of the snaps. He plays, like 40%? And sure, he's a good blocker in the run game, but I don't think he's a great blocker. They don't use him as a receiver that much. Yes, he allows their offense to look very similar when they do certain things, but McVay has shown that you can show the same similarity out of 11 and 12 personnel. And I do think I would rather have a better wide receiver than Juszczyk or a better tight end than Juszczyk on the field over Juszczyk. The Niners don't think that. They think he's really valuable. They paid him. But I do think you're reading the correct tea leaves because to me, if they keep him on past 2024, then they're just showing favoritism to a certain player. No, I'm kidding. He is a really good player. There's no doubt about it.
You're seeing it the way I see it, but you're seeing it over a 2-year span.
A year later.
So maybe Coletto or Willis are either backups or
perfect year for them to develop, right? A practice squad develop if they show something. But if they don't show anything, then, the Niners will probably keep Juszczyk because they seem to really value being in 21 personnel for, 30%.
A couple on the starred chats. Cody says, I think Sam Darnold is the guy this season for the Niners. Brother Bob says, Larry, you going on the shows of other YouTube content creators who think Purdy is dink and dunk? I want to see you debate with them. My phone is open. If you invite me on your show, I'll go. Trock says Sammy Dimes, which that to me is just the greatest Sam Darnold nickname of all time. Thank you, Trock. It wouldn't be a live stream.
We did see the bounce back from Danny Dimes last year. Maybe another New York, much maligned quarterback. Sammy Dimes makes the.
And Nees says, I'm here for Brian Allen, and I think he's talking about somebody else there. But when I saw that Brian Allen, that is the guy that remember the corner they signed on Wednesday
that Ryan Fitzpatrick abused for 2 quarters. Yeah,
Fitzpatrick came out of the huddle and he's like, "Oh, he's over there," and then literally they pointing at Brian Allen, and then they're at Brian Allen.
It's actually the second worst "Where's Waldo" moment, actually, in my opinion. Do you remember the Greg Maben game? The game C.J. Beathard played exceptional up in Lambeau, and Jimmy Ward gets hurt. in the fourth quarter and they put Greg Maben in the game and they're up 10 or something and Rodgers goes, "Where's Waldo?" on Greg Maben for 10 straight minutes and they won that game.
Yeah,
that one sucked too.
He
By the way,
he was good at Penn State, but not so good after that.
By the way, I do want to credit the 49ers for this. They went through the Brian Allen, they went through the Josh Norman, they went through the Greg Maben. They have quietly accumulated depth in this secondary, little by little. Now the corner is actually one of the deeper positions on the team. When you go down the list of Oliver and Ward and Womack and Darrell Luther and Diamador Lenore, of course, and I guess Ambry Thomas too.
Don't sleep on Deshaun Jameson.
Okay.
Deshaun Jameson is a player. Yeah, no, that's a great point because you got to have numbers on one of the biggest I didn't get into it as a topic today, but there was a guy named Mike Clay from ESPN that ranked the Niner corners, I think 24th in the league. And I did a whole video on this because to me, I always go through and count the number of corners. Why? Right. Because in the old school days, you had two starters and your third guy was kind of like, okay, maybe every now and then he'll get out there. Now your three corners are more important than your third linebacker. Your third corner's more vital, and your fourth and fifth corner matter, and your sixth and seventh corner usually see time. The Niners have Lenore, Charvarius, Isaiah Oliver. Let's just say those are the starters.
Right.
Then they've got Darrell Luter Jr., Samuel Womack, Miles Hartsfield. That's six right there. But you still have Ambry Thomas. That's seven. You still have Deshaun Jameson. That's eight. I think Quantrez Knight's probably going to be more of a safety, but they list him as a corner as well here, and he's played some corner at UCLA.
Dante Johnson will come back from injury in due time.
Dante Johnson. I mean, Taylor Hawkins played the corner at San Diego State. Now they have him lined up as a safety, but he could definitely play the corner in a pinch. I'm just saying they do, and they've got a couple other bodies in camp that are just more camp bodies. But I love the fact that the Niners are 5, 6, 7 deep, maybe even 8 deep at the corner. I like their depth at corner this year. I think it's going to be a great strength. And I'll say this, even the after watching the rookie minicamp, the two guys that kind of stood out in that secondary that don't have roster spots are Taylor Hawkins and this Avery Young from Rutgers. Both those guys started as corners. Hawkins played his whole career at the corner. He was just in bad shape
Hawkins'
last year.
body looks good, right?
Hawkins is in the greatest shape I've seen him. And he looks just like he did at San Diego State. And Avery Young is he's slow for the 40, but man, he moves well. I mean, if you watch him on the practice field, you would never say 4.78 40. So they're only going to keep 4 safeties, right? Hafanga, Gibson, Jair Brown, and George Odom are going to be those guys. But if there is an injury, I think they're fortified there too with Taylor Hawkins and Avery Young. I wouldn't be disappointed if those guys made the team.
Yeah, see, I don't think when you look at the starting secondary of Ward, Diamador Lenore, and Oliver, I do think 24 is a little bit harsh, but if you start ranking starting secondaries, I could see how you get to them being 24th. But when you look at the depth that they have in the secondary, I think that's where they have a large advantage over quite a few teams. And it's something that they've quietly accumulated that they didn't have just 2 years ago. And it really bit them in the ass because Josh Norman was playing meaningful football. Now, he did force a fumble a game, which was quite impressive too. So got to give him that.
Vish, great stuff, man. We're going to get in and get out in an hour. I've got a little dinner party tonight. I'm hanging out with Damon Bruce and the Guardsmen.
A little dinner party. When you texted it to me, you said it was a gala.
Oh, it's a cocktail. I was told to wear a suit. Okay, I'm wearing a T-shirt right now. I'm wearing a T-shirt. I'm going to go upstairs and put on a suit.
What
and my wife got her hair done.
You know what I mean? Your hair done?
No. This is basically it. I comb it. I throw a little mousse in there. That's about it.
Okay.
We'll be going to a cocktail party tonight. My wife will have to drive home because Damon said, Krug, you're going to be wasted tonight.
Okay.
So, what can I say?
What's your drink of choice when you get wasted?
Ooh, it really depends. If me and you are like in a casino and we're going to watch like Sunday football, let's say we're meeting up in Vegas or something and we're going to sit there all day. I like good, like a high quality vodka, like a Stoli or like an Absolute, and like a Greyhound, which is a grapefruit juice. I like grapefruit juice and vodka if I'm going morning drinking. If it's gonna be, I won't drink beer all day. I can't drink beer all day. If I got to drink all day, I'm going Stoli or Absolute Greyhound. Especially if it's a 5-star place that actually has real grapefruit juice.
Okay.
To me, that's awesome.
Okay,
I can
that's
do
different.
that. Ashley says screwdriver. Sometimes I'll go vodka cran. I'll go vodka
I
cran,
like
but
vodka crayons.
I can't. I got to stay away from any kind of tequila. I just have, it brings back like like muscle. I mean, it brings back like fraternity,
Yeah, I don't like it
college,
either.
you yakking
Let me
memories.
ask you this: you got family from Chicago. You ever tried Malort?
Malort? No, is it a port wine or something? What is it?
I don't even know what it is, to be 100% honest with you.
I love
But
Chicago, by the way. I love
it's Chicago
Chicago.
famous. And next time you're here, you should try it. I had Croc try it. Next time
Okay,
Croc
Vish, let
streams,
me ask you
people
this.
should
Last
ask him
question.
what he
If I
thought of it.
if I roll into Chicago and it's
Huh.
summertime and I'm like, Vish, I'm going to be here for 3 days. And you say to me, all right, we got to go do this. What would you say if I'm rolling into Chicago for a 3-day weekend in the summertime? What's like, oh, absolutely, let's go do this.
Cubs game and then go out in Wrigley after. I think that's pretty fun. There's so many
Wrigleyville,
good.
is that what it's called?
Yeah,
Wrigleyville?
yeah, for sure. Then definitely spend a day just, walking across just like obviously, the general touristic the area. So you go by the Willis Tower, you go to the Bean, you walk the Million. Yeah, you do that.
You know what I liked? I liked the architecture tour by boat that goes through the river, and then you go out into the lake and the water, and they open the doors
Oh,
and the water.
you like that?
I like that. I like that. I like
Okay,
seeing the
okay.
city. I like seeing. I like Navy Pier.
Navy Pier is definitely cool. Navy Pier is awesome.
I like Second City. A comedy. I like comedy. So I
Yeah,
like to laugh.
so I haven't actually ever gone to a Second City show yet, so that's
my
something I need to do.
Oh my! You got to be kidding! My wife's cousin works there at Second City. He's like one of
Oh, no
the
way.
comedians. Yeah, he's one of the comedians. It's like a
All
troupe.
right, Krug, next time you're in town, let me know.
Yeah,
Were you in
we'll
town for week 1?
No, but it was
Oh.
raining like crazy too. So I will.
Yeah, you're lucky. That sucked.
I am going to get out to Chicago in the next year for sure, though. And we'll definitely hook up.
Krug, by the way, you should pull up Trock's comment right above there for Malort, what I was referring to.
Let's see. Tisha Edmonds says, I think the 49ers are hosting the Super Bowl LX. Really? Was that just announced?
Oh, cool.
What, go to Hyde Park? That one?
No.
Which one? Above which one?
Trock, TROK's comment about Malort. It's like 2 comments above.
Old Fashioned?
Right below that.
Taylor? He says, Larry,
Right
need to level up your spirit game.
Do you not see Trock's comment right above Taylor Broussard's?
Right there. He says, Malort is horrible, but if you go to Chi-Town, you need to take a shot. I'll take a shot. I like throwing back shots.
It's disgusting. I don't know if I'll go to disgusting, but
is it like Jägermeister?
It's way worse.
Jägermeister is kind of like cough medicine.
Yeah, it's pretty gross.
Look at Gregus. I hate Chicago. What? The city with broad shoulders?
He's been talking to Jason McIntyre too much.
Chicago's a great fucking city, man. Oh, by the way, somebody told me that I swear too much, so I got to stop swearing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is that affecting your monetization at all?
Well, I don't know if it's affecting the monetization, but you know what? I don't like to offend people. And the guy who sent me the picture or sent me the comment, I looked at his screen, his little avatar, and it was him and his 2 little boys. So I'm picturing a guy watching maybe with his little boys there, and I'm dropping F-bombs. And I just wanted to say, I agree that if you're good, you should be able to work clean. You shouldn't have to work blue. You know what I mean? And I consider myself good. I don't think I have to work blue. I will clean it up. Sometimes I get in the mood and I just start dropping bombs, but you know what? I'll clean it up. Because I don't need to. I mean,
Did they
the
make you clean it
content
up
that
on
we
the
put out is
radio?
good enough. What's that?
Did they make you clean it up on the radio?
Well, you can't. Yeah, you can't. You can't swear on the radio at all, which was fine. Maybe that's why. Maybe now that I'm here, I'm testing my boundaries. But I will clean it up. Then there's other people like, I love it when Krueg starts to drop F-bombs. I got to be, we got this one. Just be you, Larry. Just be you. Thank you.
Just be you.
Well, this is a good one too. Would you say something? Would you say sometimes you get lazy? Larry, I love you, but you're effing lazy. All right. Oh, wait, we got the last one here. Waveware. F no, Larry, don't swear.
Oh, you didn't say it.
Caesar says Larry is for the kids. That's right. I got 4 of my own. Come on. I'm here for I want our content to be good, and if it gets a little edgy, that's okay. But I don't need to drop a bunch of F-bombs to be edgy. You know that. Everybody knows that.
100%.
Kieran says, F that. Do you, Larry? Fire. Look at this one. This is also kind of here we go. Chris Hansen has made this exact comment like 25 times. Larry always reads the girl in the bikinis comments.
Is he talking about Ashley?
He's talking about Ashley. Well, Ashley is a friend. Ashley's a friend. So you know what?
Friend of the show.
And she's a friend of the show, and she's, so yeah, and if you were a good friend of mine, Chris, I would absolutely do yours too. But you're right. I probably read too many of Ashley's, but it's not because she's in a bikini. All right. Tommy Huxley says week 2, Niners drop a 60 burger on the Lambs. 60? Come on. Taylor says, test the theory. Wear a bikini, Chris Hansen. There you go. Chris Hansen and when I see Chris Hansen and I see the guy's picture, I'm always thinking of that terrible show. Why don't you come over here and sit down? Why did you bring a change of clothes? Why'd you bring a bag? That show, it was like I could not turn that show off watching those pedophiles and those freaks. I just could not turn it off. But at the same time, it's awful, but it was like very oddly compelling. All right. Anyway, East Coast Red and Gold podcast says, Krueg, do a show after the party. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Damon Bruce.
Yeah, exactly. Damon start getting mad at Damon was freaking out the other day on who was Damon complaining about? Breezy. He was complaining about Breezy. He's like, oh, what, you're on with Breezy? I'm like, Damon, don't rip Breezy, man. Breezy's my guy. All right, Vish, good stuff. Hey, we'll talk to you next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday, you got it. At the Vish Kumaran Show. Let him know. See you, Krueg. Thanks as always. Have a good rest of your day and have a good weekend.
You
Go
too,
LeBron
man.
Tonight.
Enjoy the game. We'll talk to you Tuesday. There you go. The great Vish Kumaran. All right, let me get a quick word from our sponsors. We are brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. They got 2 locations. They're in Corte Madera. They're also in Emeryville. Here's their spot in Corte Madera, open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California.
So New York style sausage was started over 70 years ago. We are the largest producer of fresh Italian sausage on the West Coast.
What makes our sausage in New York style is really the recipe came from back east, from New York, from Connecticut.
If you look at all of our labels, there's maximum 4 or 5 ingredients, which we're really proud of.
There's no preservatives, no MSG, fresh in, fresh out.
The pork comes in fresh, goes out fresh. There's never any freezing throughout the process. We've always used fine quality cuts. We're never going to deter from that. It's one of the reasons why our sausage is so good. I guarantee you put our sausage up against anybody else's from a flavor standpoint, no one will beat it, hands down.
Hey, do yourself a favor and do me a favor. Go buy a package of the New York style Italian sausage. Guaranteed you will love it, guaranteed.
All right, coming down the home stretch. Hope everybody enjoys the show. One last super chat. G-Code Travels Vlog POV. Did Tampa Bay Rays structured their roster like the 49ers? Not sure what that means, but thank you very much, G-Code, for the $1.99. We appreciate that. Have a great night, everybody. It's time for me to get my drink on. I'm gonna start. I gotta hit the cocktail party with the great D Bruce. Have a great night. Hey, tomorrow on the show, Jack Hammer's going to stop by. Should be really good. We'll break things down with Jack, talk a little Niner football. Minicamp coming up on Tuesday. Until then, peace.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get exactly what you asked for. Here for whatever you bring me, getting handled. I answer to no one, I don't need to have.